So you grew up here. I saw that you went to WSU.
Yeah, I did.
So you're a Husky fan.
Welcome to the Exploring Washington State podcast. Here's your host, Scott Cowan.
I would like you guys just to make me stop talking and tell me about where we're sitting first off, this beautiful space. Craig, this was in your family, I heard.
Yes, we're in Tieton, Washington. This little town of Tieton is a farming town at the west end of the Yakima Valley at about 2,000 foot elevation. And this is when our grandfather started farming in the late 20s.
What brought your grandfather here?
He married into a farming family, a German farming family, is what I was told. And they, he started, that's how he got started.
Okay. And you grew up here?
I grew up here.
Sharon, you mentioned he was riding his motorcycle around here as a kid about this site. So Craig, I'm just going to ask you this. So what's changed since you were a kid here?
One thing that's really noticeable is the weather's considerably warmer. We used to have 2 to 3 feet of snow pretty steady in the winter. And now we just have, less snow in the winter. So it's, the talk about all the climate warming, it's certainly, you can see it here in my lifetime.
Okay.
And it's actually been positive in a way here. An extra 2 or 3 degrees here is actually just fine for us. We're about 7 degrees every day cooler than Yakima on a given day in the summer, which is positive for the fruit we grow.
When you were growing up here, were you raising the same crops then as you are now, or have you changed through the years?
Almost everything has been replanted. We still farm pears, and we used to be all Red Delicious here. They're all gone now. And we have all these other new varieties we're growing. So still apples. And then the other new thing we're doing is my grandfather used to grow apricots initially. And we got back in the apricot business about 15 years ago as a niche. And that's been good for us as well.
And then there's cherries.
And then we grow cherries also. Late season cherries, and we harvest the end of July here.
So about how many acres of apples in its entirety?
Apples, about 250.
And are they all organic?
Yes.
Is your entire farm organic?
It's about 97% organic. We have one field of apples that's not, but pretty much all the pears are organic, all the apricots, all the cherries. And
so how many acres of apricots?
30.
And cherries?
30.
Seeing a trend. How about pears?
Pears, we have about 60.
So when I was reading, so this is where I get to start showing my lack of knowledge. On your website for Harmony, you mentioned pears and Perry.
Yes.
Perry pears.
Perry pears.
So what's the difference? To me, pear, is that like this? Is that the equivalent of dessert fruit apples and cider apples?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
A Perry pear is a term that comes from Europe, and that's considered to be that's a pear just grown for cider making.
Okay.
And they're very high in tannin, almost inedible, very high sugar and high in tannin. And that's what those, and they're very small.
Oh, they're small.
Size. They're small in size.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's the characteristic of that fruit.
So when we were driving up today, I noticed some pears on the right side of my car.
Yes, yeah. Those are Bartlett pears.
Those are Bartlett's. Okay.
Yeah, but we most of ours are grown at another farm. Our Perry's in Yakima.
Okay.
The climates, it seemed like it's a little better for them there. And the cider apples are much better up here than in Yakima. It's a cooler climate up here, which they're more akin to based on where we've come from in Europe.
Okay. So you grew up here. I saw that you went to WSU.
Yeah, I did.
So you're a Husky fan.
Yeah, no, it's all about football every weekend, and it's all about WSU and one game a year. That's important. So we're hoping. We have a lot of hope this year. So we'll see.
Well, at the time we're recording this yesterday,
Yeah, they cooked it.
Yeah,
They cooked it yesterday.
They got hammered
guys.
by FC yesterday.
I'm
so
sorry.
that's true.
I was getting ready to record an episode with somebody, and I checked the score, and it was like, I think the Cougars were up like 14-0. I'm like, oh, this is great.
Really great.
And then by the end of my recording, it was like, oh, well, that wasn't so great.
That wasn't so
great. And then
great,
the Huskies finally won big, so I get so they are pretty good, but they didn't start out very well. So we'll see how it goes here. There's always hope.
So what did you major in at WCO?
Horticulture.
You were horticulture,
right?
And what did you do after college?
After college, my father encouraged me to leave the farm, and he always felt that there's more money, downstream, be it in the sales business or packing business. So I went to work for a distant cousin of mine in the fruit brokerage business in San Jose, California.
Oh, okay.
And only planned to be there 4 or 5 years, learn the business, come back here. But I ended up staying in the Bay Area for over 30 years and started a fruit brokerage company, which we still have today in San Francisco that covers all of Northern California and some into Los Angeles.
Wow. And then you met in San Francisco.
Right. Yes.
So let's pick up your part of the story now. When did you come to the farm?
Well, like when I first came to visit?
Yeah. When did you first come to visit?
Well, I mean, because the farm was always in Craig's vision, I came to the farm rather quickly.
Okay.
To sort of, and he was pretty clear that Washington was his end game. So even though I met him in California and didn't really know anything about what a produce broker was, or it had an even farther visit, like way, way back, what is an apple grower? So came here, and then Craig was pretty clear that even though he had this company in San Francisco, that his long-term goal was to come back to Washington.
Okay.
And then when it became easier to telecommute, we moved and built a house in Seattle, and it was easier for Craig to be here, at our farm. And also then he can do his business that he has to do for CDS. That's his company in San Francisco. Via the telephone. No one cares where you are anymore. Right. People used to want to know where you were, right? Are you in your office? No, that's not a thing anymore. It's everybody's just wherever they are. And so I came 40 years ago.
Okay.
And then we came seriously 20 years ago to Washington. We relocated from California.
And how do you put you on the spot? How do you like it in Washington?
Oh, I think Washington is great. And I was really ready to leave California.
Okay.
Yeah. I spent 20 years in California and it was fantastic, but Washington's it's just a beautiful state. And there's just so many things about Washington that work for me. Politically, I like the politics here. Okay. I like the vistas here. I like the people. The people are just, Washingtonians are fabulous.
Well, since you're not from here, I'm going to put you on the spot. Craig's already pretty much said he's Cougar fan. Is there tension in the family? I love that one. There's like the Husky family and the Cougar family.
No. I didn't go to the university.
I know. So who do you root for? You could root for anybody. Now, see?
Well, I'm not. I actually don't really care about college football.
Okay.
Yeah, that's easy for me. I don't. It's like whatever,
Okay. It's that rivalry. It's fun. I went to Central. So I can I can pick which team to root for or not for any given year. I have no allegiance, although I will admit I have both. I have autographed Husky helmets in my office and autographed WSU helmets in my office. So I have both. But I'm a baseball guy, so I'm a Mariners fan. So that's how I can dodge that one.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk. So you moved back here full time about 20 years ago.
Correct.
Into Washington State. And Craig, when did you guys take over I don't even know if that's the correct way of saying this, the day-to-day running of the farm? When did it?
My father passed away 24 years ago. So it started, we had some other farming businesses, in the Pasco area, which I was already doing. And then my father passed away. Then we took this over too. So I've been farming, for 40 years, but on this particular farm every day for about 25.
About 25. What'd you have? What were you growing down in Pasco?
We were growing primarily apples. We were growing some peaches down, peaches, nectarines, and apples.
Okay. What was the inspiration to get into cider?
That's a interesting question. We had two friends that we went on a ski trip to Sun Valley, actually, and one of Cindy had just taken a class at Cornell on cider making, and her husband at the time worked for Whole Foods, and it was just talking about he had worked back east for Whole Foods, and so there was that he knew the apple business on the retail end, and so Cindy she wanted to make cider, and I'm someone interested in growing apples, learning about new varieties, so it hatched on that trip. Sharon was always more on the design side, sell side, marketing side. And so we found a small cidery outside of Portland that wanted to sell. So we bought a little bit of equipment, and they had some cider apples, cider-specific varieties. So we were able to get into business much quicker than we'd anticipated. We thought we'd plant an orchard, and they had to have these apples, and it'd take 4 or 5 years to get started. But suddenly we were ready to start like 1, 2, 3. And the first year we did about 300 cases in 750 milliliter bottles in 2008.
So for perspective, what was production for 2020?
At the Tieton Cider Works presently?
Yeah.
Yeah, about 100,000 cases.
Mm-hmm.
We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
I had no idea. So you bought a small operation, so that was able to jumpstart it.
Yes.
Were you making the cider to start with, or did you bring in a cider maker?
No, like I say, Cindy, which was one of the initial partners, she was a cider maker initially.
Okay.
For the first probably 2 years. And so she did that. Sharon designed all the labels, did the marketing, kind of went door to door with a bottle of cider in Seattle at the time.
Okay,
Well,
let's stop. I want to hear the door-to-door story.
Well, there wasn't a cider section. You used to go into a grocery store or a liquor store or you name it, retail space, and they didn't have a cider section. We, the Northwest Cider Association, actually pushed so that we could move beer over just a little bit to put cider in.
That was easy.
Yeah, really.
That was easy, right? Beer was willing to give you up those linear feet.
Yes, and all those guys stocking those shelves, they'd go, "What is this? What do you got here?"
Well, so how was in initial days when you were going quote unquote door to door? How was cider received?
It depended on the person receiving it. The curious would go, "Really?" And you'd explain, most of them had a background that they knew cider existed in Europe. Some of them knew cider existed on the East Coast, but they didn't quite know. There were probably originally about 8 people, making cider in Washington State, a very small number. They weren't interested in growing that much, not like what we're doing or some of the other larger companies are doing. So there was a little bit of presence, but really it was this industry had to be built up from the ground to actually say we are a presence.
Right.
We're an apple growing state and we are a presence.
Yeah, it's because now flash forward to 2021, cider has in most grocery stores has a presence.
Mm-hmm. Even the small mom and pop stores,
right,
all have a cider presence.
So, for example, in Wenatchee, there's this little independent grocery store that probably has 100 different varieties at any given time.
Really?
Yeah,
that's terrific.
It is, and that might. But when I say 100, I mean 8 of them might be yours. In other words, they've got 8 of your varieties. So but you go in there and it's not just Angry Orchard.
Correct. Yes, it's not the national ones.
Right. So you were going door to door. You were, and I've glossed over the design piece of that. So there's a story to the design. Craig was mentioning this to me earlier about the spiral.
Yes.
Can you elaborate?
Yes. So, well, I'm very into symbols and the origin of symbols and what symbol and, what that means. And when we had this, so originally the property that we're looking down on now, this 100 acres, it wasn't ours when we built our house here that we're sitting at.
Oh.
And then we bought that land. And then I said I would really like to have this sort of symbol that we could do with trees, which is the spiral, which was planted way before we had that as a logo or, was associated with our cidery. But it has always been on our label for our tree fruit.
Okay.
If you look at a Harmony Orchards box, there's a spiral on that also. So that's a symbol. And the spiral to me has always been, you live your life in one way, which is what I view the spiral to be. You live your life in this way, and you really never know your life until you can turn around and sort of unwind it.
Okay.
Right? We never really know where we're going. We have a plan, but our plans all take different routes, different turns, different things happen. We meet different people. And so we're continually building this little spiral in my mind, in my world. And then when you get to a certain point, you're able to turn around and you're able to see what you've actually created in your world. So that's what the spiral means to me.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so you incorporated that into the artwork for the.
Well, I really wanted that as a symbolism, something that I really love to see, so that I could see it out my window here in this land.
Right.
So then so this is very true of the spiral, right? So I wanted it here on the land so I could see it, and then that spiral then became a logo, so to speak, or a branding of our farming. And then we carried it off when we went and did the cidery. So there's this spiral story right there, right? You're starting to make a loop. And then this is it being manifest. And the first time we saw a picture of it, Google Earth, I mean, one of our controllers was showing us something. There was, remember when the Apple industry had that terrible 2008, Craig, is that right? Or was there a big downturn? It
was in the late 80s.
Late 80s. No, because we had this in here. But regardless of that, there's been
several downturns.
We shouldn't laugh. about that. Sorry.
Yeah, there's several downturns. So anyway, there was what was happening in Yakima County where several people said they weren't farming their land, so they wouldn't have to pay the taxes on it. So then the county was going out and doing all these aerial photographs. So our controller laid the aerial map down one day, and I was sitting backwards, and I looked and I went, "Is that the spiral from Earth?" And it was starting to show up. I mean, now what are those trees, Craig? 40 feet?
Oh, they're 60 feet.
60 feet. Well, so they started out, like a foot tall.
Right.
They were a little tiny spiral. And I have been at tastings when we have a really wonderful aerial photograph of that we used to use as tastings when I was going door to door. And an Alaska Airlines Horizon pilot came up to me one day and he goes, "Oh, I know where you are." He said, "I see that."
When he flies into Yakima.
Yeah, or leaves the Yakima flying in or whatever. Yeah, he said, "That's really visible from the air, your spiral."
That's great.
Yeah, okay. No, it is. And Craig's been up in a helicopter and seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's pretty neat.
So when you first started making cider, did you move the equipment from the Portland area up here, or
Yes,
it was always here.
We brought everything up here, and we had a building on our one of our farms south of here, about 5 miles, and we had a kind of a tractor shed, and so we made that into a cidery. We put the tanks in there, and we had a press over there, and we were there for.
We pressed outside.
And I swear to God, every time in the winter we needed to press, it was below 32. So it was a very difficult situation up here for to make cider. We were out in the middle of nowhere, although it was close to where the apples were primarily. But and then it was we did that for 8 years, I guess, or 7 years. And then one day I said, "Sharon, if we're going to move this thing forward, we have to get a bigger building. We have to get into Yakima. And we've got to change this whole thing around." So we we found a large space in Yakima off 16th Avenue.
2014.
Which is where you're at now, right?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
2014.
So do you have that whole building?
Well, we have 75% of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a lot of.
We have 30,000 square feet now.
That's a lot of square footage.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And we're getting close to running out of that space, aren't we?
Yeah, we're yes.
Really?
We're at capacity.
We can run night shifts and we can do some other things, but we need every bit of it now.
Mm-hmm. So the original partner, Cindy, they decided to start a family, and then her commuting back and forth didn't work, and that's when we hired Marcus Robert.
Okay.
And that was the move.
Okay.
That was the move that allowed us to grow, and he still is such an integral part of the business.
Okay.
He is really the one who runs the day-to-day operations. He's the one who develops all of the new varieties that we have, and that was the game changer.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Marcus grew up in Glebe, or Natchez, I guess you could say. And he had a small winery at the time, so he was making some wine, and comes from a farming family. And we put an ad in one of the like winejobs.com or
yes,
and
something like that. Yeah.
He responded and he said he had a winery in Natchez, and I said I didn't know there was a winery in Natchez. Yeah. And he came up here and he worked on the farm for a while, and because we kind of split that about making cider, and but he made great Sangiovese, but he doesn't have time for that anymore. But he's a great sort of cook in the kitchen. He's a great cider maker, and he's the president of the company now, and so he's an integral part. He's been with us for 10 years, I believe, 10 going on 11. So it's been great.
So I'm going to say, to me, that in volume, your growth has been explosive.
Exactly.
Yes.
I'm sure it was perfectly smooth. No setbacks.
It's been a lot of setbacks. Okay.
So thank you, because one of the questions I love to always ask is, because I always think there's a good lesson to be learned by setbacks or mistakes. Anything that you guys started that you thought was going to be a brilliant idea, that when you got going, you're like, ooh, maybe, like, was there a variety? Like, did you try to do, I'm being facetious, but, lavender and apricot blend cider, and it just didn't work or anything like that?
There have been a couple of blends that didn't work, but actually the whole cider industry in Washington, I think I can say that. Let's just say a portion of the cider. We really, and it was in the East Coast too. We really thought that cider would go into a 750 and cider would be thought of as wine.
Okay.
And now I'm sure you think of cider as the cousin to beer, not to the cousin to wine.
It's funny. I think of it both ways.
Okay.
In the sense that, especially like, because Snowdrift's 7 miles from my house, right? And so they do a lot of stuff in 750s.
They do, and they are the exception, not the rule.
So, but I think like their Perry that they have, not that we want to talk about them today, no offense to them, but we're talking about you guys. That comes in a 750, so that to me is more of a celebratory type thing. Have it with a nice dinner.
And they market their cider differently than we do. I mean, Craig is a volume guy. Right. Am I correct, Craig?
Yes. That's where. This is I hate to say it, it's a production driven business for us. And until we really got into the can business, this business was just, we were feeding it every year to keep it going. So we started with 750s, and then they were saying,
went to 500s.
And then it, needed to be, less than X. And then so we went to 500s to get the retail price. And we were selling at $6 to $8 a bottle, but that's just one bottle at a time. And it's, it's like selling molasses. So it was, when we really got into the can thing, 12, 16 ounce cans, which was, 4 or 5 years ago now, I guess, that changed the business for us. Because then you could sell a 6-pack or a 4-pack of 12s or 16s or that was the trend. We were a little late in the trend, quite frankly.
Late in the can business.
Some of our bigger competitors were ahead of us in cans, and we were rapidly catching up. But that changed the business for us, because it was just kind of a niche thing. These bottles, they sell, but it's a slow sell.
Okay.
And I think to go back to your original question, that is what really we started thinking that this would be X,
Mm-hmm.
and now it's basically a can business and kegs.
Yeah, kegs were always a part of our business. And then, the COVID, in let's see, 2020, the bars were shut down. So then unfortunately, we had a lot of retail business, and we were pretty well positioned with cans and different blends. And our business, actually, we had a very good year in 20. And it's, so now that's solidified as we're back, the bars are open, we're back in that. But our business primarily now is retail chain stores. So that's what drives our business.
Okay.
And that's just where, rather than fighting for a tap handle every week, they're going to rotate them or they're going to give you this or that. We love that business, but the things that drives us is, the shelf space with these retailers.
And that we didn't even know really when we started that would be a thing, that we would really be like in cans next to beer,
Right.
that was not in my peripheral vision at all.
So you kind of thought it was going to be competing with wine then? I mean,
Yes.
would that be,
Yes.
but even though when we started this conversation, you said getting it in next to beer.
Yeah. Well, that was where they put us,
Right.
Yeah. Because we needed to be cold.
Right.
Wine doesn't shelf stable. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And to add to the bottle thing, so we started with 750s, then we were in 500 mLs, which is 16.9 ounces. And then a lot of like Angry Orchards, they were all a 6-pack of 12-ounce bottles. And they, regardless of how you feel about their cider, they had the distribution with the Salmon network to really get a box of cider in every store and convenience store in America.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it was there. So at least you could buy cider pretty much anywhere. And that really helped the whole industry. And they've been chipped away now with regional cideries like ourselves across America, but they really helped the whole industry distribution wise.
My layman's interpretation that it's a lot like Starbucks did for small coffee roasters by convincing you that you could pay $5 for a cup of coffee. And now you can go down here in Natchez and probably pull into one of those espresso stands and pay $4.50 for a cup of coffee. You would not have done that before.
Which would have been unheard of. So it wasn't
Right.
so much that, that we're selling it for more money, but they just got it out there and they established it
Right.
at a price for a 6-pack. And then the next step was cans. They're cheaper, obviously, to make. The recycling's better. We think actually cider, there's no oxidation in the can. We think cider is actually better in cans. I mean, people might disagree with that, but we think the quality is consistently better. So those things, and the retailers really, like in Portland, I mean, they want things in cans. They don't want a lot of bottles down there.
Okay.
For the recycling aspect. So, it just matches up well, with, on a number of fronts here with a can.
Are you doing your own canning?
Yes.
Okay. So that takes up, I'm going to guess that the canning line takes up a bunch of square footage.
It's the size of this table.
Okay. So since this is an audio format, I'm going to say this table is about,
It's about 3 by 6.
yeah.
So the canning machine is about 4 by 10, but it doesn't take a lot of space for
You're
a canning.
kidding me.
No, it's quite, I mean, you have to have a whole pallet destacker to get the cans into the actual machine, but the machine itself is much smaller than you might think.
How many cans an hour can that machine do?
It's more a minute. I think
Okay.
it's, don't quote me. I think it's more like, we do 60 cans a minute or they're about 60 to 80.
Wow. Really?
Yes.
I would.
You can stop by.
It's not that I don't believe you. That's not what I'm trying to
It's
imply.
at least 60.
I'm like, wow, that's very efficient.
Yeah, it's what we have. It's a multi-lane canner, but so yeah, we do everything in house.
Everything in house.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Where do you get where do the cans come from originally? I mean,
there's I believe there's just 2 can manufacturers in
America.
in America, that are big. And Ball's, we work with Ball, and they make cans for everything from LaCroix water to Budweiser, Coors to everything else. And there's been a can shortage through COVID, as because more things are going through retail, less through on premise and bars. And so we're on an allocation as everybody. There's a lot of, as you will see, out of stocks on the shelf, be it Budweiser, Coors, or Tieton Cider Works at times. So cans have almost been the limiting factor on making more cider. It's quite a they're putting in 2 new plants, I believe. One's in Arizona, one's back east. There's just a huge demand for cans across America.
One more supply chain story that we're hearing in just
Correct.
very unusual places.
Yeah.
So are the cans for cider different than a can for beer?
Yes, they have a different coating inside because apples have malic acid, and so there's a coating they put on the inside of a can that's different than beer.
Okay.
The can itself is the same.
The can, but the lining.
There's a liner. Yes.
What? Okay, so you said you were late to cans.
Mm-hmm.
What was the motivation to? I mean, when did you have that aha moment that we need to be in cans? I mean, what was it that the market was?
The market was telling us that. I mean, just based on the growth. You look at Nielsen data, the growth is all in cans.
Okay.
I mean, the bottles are just flat to going down, and we're all in that, and all the growth is either 12 at the time, 12 or 16 ounce cans, and it's like, wow, we actually started a separate brand at the time called Rambling Route, which we still make some of that. Along with Tieton. We were just afraid Tieton is a premium brand. If we start putting in cans, we're going to discount the image and everything. But that really, now it
doesn't matter.
It's
now.
our main brand, and it's all in cans.
That's all that growing pains that we were talking
Yeah,
about. These are all those things that we
probably 5% of our volume now is in bottles.
That's it.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And we now have the new can. It's a 19.2 ounce can. We kind of call them stovepipes. You see them at the convenience stores.
Yeah.
I bought a couple.
And we're, that's been great growth for us the last year or so. We just started doing those. And we do a blueberry and a huckleberry, and they're just rocking off the shelves.
Will you put other ones in those, do you think?
We're working on some things for next year.
Okay. So bouncing around, let's talk about the tasting room.
Okay.
When did that open? And the oversimplified question, why did it open? I mean,
well, we go back to that small building we were at, that's like, 4 miles from where we're sitting to going to Yakima. And then the plant in Yakima was, well, if we're going to do that, then we'll do the tasting room.
Okay.
So that was right at the end of when I was involved in the cidery. So I said to Craig, my background is design. So I said, I'll get you moved into the new plant. I'll create a tasting room, and I'll redesign the labels, because that was the other thing that the market was telling us, that, we never knew we were going to have this growth. So if and then we never knew we were going to have so many products. Mm-hmm. So then we needed to differentiate our products. And then we worked with a graphic design firm that came up with the different fruit that you see on our labels now, that each fruit, whatever's in the can or bottle, is represented in the label. And I said, I'll get all of that done, and then I will be finished.
Okay.
So it was 2014. And in the tasting room, that's actually better than even our tasting room right now is our Cider Club.
I'm a member.
Oh, you are? Okay. Oh, that's great. Yeah. So then the Cider Club, is what drives really for Marcus to think about new things. And then being in the Cider Club, as you know, you'll get things that maybe will never make it to the shelf. They'll just be things that Marcus creates or is trying for the Cider Club. Yeah.
Right. So we went to the tasting room, my wife and I, and it's hard to get a good feel for anything during this current, situation.
Right.
But it looks like you have a little stage set up out of, for music.
Hay bales,
Hay bales.
Yeah. Well, bins.
Yeah,
bins.
Fruit
bins.
Fruit
Yeah.
bins, yeah.
Yeah.
But no, it's just, it looks like, and then there's...
We have a bocce ball court. We put that in. It's kind of entertainment.
Right.
And,
food truck there on
Food
occasion.
trucks come. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
on the weekends.
Mm-hmm.
Sharon designed the inside. We used old tree props. Used to prop up the limbs of these big old trees, and as a wall covering, and give it kind of an orchard feel. The inside of the tasting room.
It's a very welcoming space.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
It's a very welcoming space, and your staff has always been very kind when we go in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you can, tip your cap to the staff. We'll put you both on the spot. What's your favorite cider?
Oh, for me, it's always the apricot. And that stems from, I'm a cook, and I think that cider pairs better with food than any of our other ciders.
Okay. And you?
I like 2, and I have to stay with 2, even though you say 1.
That's fine. I'll let you.
The organic apple is my everyday go-to cider, and we have the new single varietal Porter Perfection that I think is the best cider we've ever made.
Oh yeah, well that actually is really stellar. But
okay,
but I
very
would
limited
say, yeah.
release, and
so that's why the other one's the daily, your daily. Okay, more celebratory for the. But you should be able to get your hands on it. I think if you went down there, you could get your hands.
I can get it in my hands. I have some.
We
right
have an
here.
account.
Yeah.
We have an account there.
You know somebody.
Yeah.
I have a case of that cider here at the house, but I tend to like straight apple more than all the flavors. Is where is all the growth for us. But I just like the taste of apples.
Okay.
I just think that what Marcus did with that, and when he and I spoke and said, okay, what are we going to do with this line? And are we going to have a flavored cider? And we have an apricot cider because we grow apricots, and we have a cherry. That's how we start. We have a cherry cider because we grow cherries, apricot, and then Craig was doing the peri pears. So that sort of was our original line. But when Marcus came up with that apricot, I just thought it was stellar. And I still think it's the best apricot cider in the market. I've tasted all the others, and it's great. And we didn't mention, but the other thing that when we were starting, what we were really trying to do was this goes way back to when we were like in the bottles and everything, but we were trying to get cider to be shown as an alternative to wine for food. Because there really is something about cider with food that's actually better than what wine is. If people would just sit down and do a little food testing or wine tasting or cider tasting with certain dishes, I think they would really find that that's really the better alcoholic product to drink with food, excuse me.
Well, thank you for setting the table for me, because that was what I wanted to ask you is let's talk about cider and food, because in my conversations with other cider makers, I haven't asked that question. And I'm curious if you would share with us some pairings that you think go well with some of your ciders. Well,
so what we did, and this would probably be about maybe 8 years ago now, I went to, I'd taken several cooking classes from a woman who is now a good friend, Alaya Land. And I went to Alaya and I said, let's do something for our website with food. And she goes, that is an excellent thing. She goes, because I don't even know what food to pair with cider. So we spent 2 weeks writing recipes and taking our line, and saying, okay, this one works with the apricot cider. In fact, last night what I made was this quinoa soup that has potatoes and squash and cilantro in it. And it was a recipe that Alaya and I had adapted from a Deborah Madison. But on mine, it still says pair with apricot cider.
Okay.
And there were some that we did with our peri, a scallop recipe. And one night we were I spent 3 days working on this black cod, marinating it, doing all these different things. And I bought sake to go with it. And we had company over. And I opened the sake and Craig goes, I can't drink this. I just can't drink this. And I had in the refrigerator a spice cider that Marcus was working on. And we hadn't quite figured out what we were going to do with it. We wound up calling it Holiday Cheer one year. We wound up calling it some kind of spice one year. But the market never took to it. Okay. So it's not around anymore. But for a long time, Marcus and I were trying. So I went to the refrigerator and I got a bottle of this spice cider. And with this miso preparation on this black cod, I mean, you've never seen 4 people who almost fell over because it was so delicious. And my friend still talks about it, that when you took a bite of that black cod and when you had a sip of that spice cider, it was like the most perfect pairing that you've ever put in your mouth.
Yes, I would not have drawn the line between that.
Exactly. And so there was a lot of experimentation that had to happen. But I loved that because like I said, I'm a cook, and that with working with Alaya for that month and then getting it all photographed, and it was exhausting, but it was fabulous.
So what's another good pairing? I mean, give us a couple quick and easy ones, because everyone's busy. Right. So do you have any quick and easy pairings? Well, any
chili will go with any of the apple ciders.
Okay.
Any of the, even the stronger, sort of more heirloomy ciders, that'll grow well. Any sort of chicken dish will go well with any probably of the berry ciders that are out there, whether it be our cherry cider or our huckleberry or our blueberry, and any kind of chicken dish. So if you had anything even off the grill, would be fabulous. Let me keep thinking. Of course, there's always the going back to the brie and the cheese. Always goes with any sort of cider. Let me think what else we did that we had. I'm drawing a blank right now.
Craig,
yeah.
What goes well with your organic cider?
Many things. I'm not a cook like my wife.
I know, but what do you like? What do you?
But I tend to like a lot of fish and some chicken, and it's great with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think back to the website and all the photographs that we had.
Because we did a number of those and with the actual recipes. And
Yeah, we put recipes on and photographed them. And then, of course, what happened is we had them all in the bottles. We had the bottles in our photographs. Then those went to can. And we were like, oh, my God, we have to reshoot all this. So anyway, but we did a whole burger thing, too, where we did like a lobster roll.
Ooh.
Yeah. And
so what did you pair with the lobster roll?
Well, I'm pretty sure that we had the apricot with that also.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not easy to find on our website because I think over time, because
I didn't stumble across this.
Yes, but it's not. It's there.
Okay.
I mean, I might be able to get you the link for it. It's there.
Yeah, I didn't stumble on that.
Yeah.
Someone put you on the spot. What you haven't mentioned your peach bourbon.
Yes, well, that is now our number one seller. Prior to that, it was apricot. Apricot.
Really?
Yeah.
And the story about apricot was our distributor at the time in Seattle said, you got something for the summer, so we grow apricots. So we did this apricot cider, thinking it was just a seasonal. And about November, the guys over there said, look, you're going to be making this every day, every year for us because we can't keep this on the shelves. So that was the story with that. And that was always our number one. And then we came out with the bourbon barrel peach cider. I guess it was 2 years ago now, and same kind of thing. It was just going to be a summer thing, and then now it's our number one seller. And so that's our growth has really been in these blends. Last summer we came out with the hazy strawberry to kind of go with hazy beer, and that's a good summertime thing. In the spring we have the lavender honey. We got local honey and we got local lavender that Marcus came up with, and that's real popular early in the year. And then we do cranberry as the seasonal in the fall here. So, the bourbon barrel, initially we did it with Dry Fly. We did a collaboration in Spokane using their used bourbon barrels. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't need to be in the barrel very long too, because the cider, I guess it's more delicate than say wine, lower alcohol. So a little bit of bourbon and I think people, when you say bourbon, you say peach. For most people, that's like, oh, let me try that.
Well, let me ask you this question. Even though you're not the cider maker, I'm going to ask you like you are the cider maker. Did putting it in the barrels change the alcohol content?
No, all of our ciders are right at, they used to be all 6.9% because
rocking it.
That was the federal law. If you were under 7, then it was the lower tax. That's been changed. We still call it 6.9, but it's basically 7%. That's the alcohol in our ciders. Has to do with how many bricks are in apples typically.
Which is the sugar.
The sugar in the apples. So
she saw them look on my face.
Yeah, I did.
So if an apple has bricks of 12, which is 12%, then when you ferment it to dryness, you'll get half that. You'll get 6.
Okay.
And so you have to add back. We add back a little bit of sometimes just straight apple juice to sweeten it to balance it out. And so we end up right at 7. So that's most ciders are right around between 6 and 7% alcohol.
Now you mentioned previously taxation, if it was higher than 7, was it classified as wine then?
Correct.
There was like there was a champagne tax that was in there too. So there was, that had to do with carbonation. So there was some tricky parts of this. The champagne tax came from, I guess it had to do with France after the war or something, but that's gone away as well.
Okay.
So that's positive. We had some positive federal legislation on that.
Yeah, there's a National Cider Association that was formed by people all over the country, and they've worked hard to get some of these archaic laws off the books.
Or updated. Reflect. Okay. So what do you think the future holds for cider?
I think cider has quite a good future here. The seltzers have had the real growth. So you go to the shelf now, and obviously beer, cider has its spot, and then the seltzers weren't even around 6-7 years ago, and so that's been a huge growth. But I think looking at the data, that's starting to tip off a little bit. Obviously, still very popular. Low calories, low alcohol, different flavors. But to me the seltzer doesn't really have a particular story. Cider has a story. It's an American story. We're an apple country. It still takes an apple tree to make cider. Now, that's not the case with seltzer. So I think with the regional cideries like ourselves, I think it's a good future.
Okay. Put you on the spot. What's the future for Tieton cider? What's that look like for you guys? You mentioned earlier that you're getting close to capacity in your current space. Will you guys go? Do you think you'll go bigger, or? Yeah,
we're going to continue to grow. Our growth has been double digits the last 3 years, and we just want to keep pushing it.
Okay.
And we've got pretty substantial plans for the next 2 years.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So, in doing a little prep, if you haven't noticed, I don't do a lot of prep for these, but I try to do some. Mm-hmm. So Craig, you mentioned in a video I watched somewhere, and I think it was for a fruit organization. So I think it was more for, maybe not for the public, but more for your industry. Mm-hmm. Something, and I'm going to butcher it, but you mentioned that you think your fruit has more sugars in it now that you're organic than they did when you were not growing organically. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And can you help maybe explain that?
Well, I think it's not maybe so much sugar, because that can depend on the weather each year. I mean, this year with this warm weather, we noticed that the pears picked at the same maturity had almost 2% more sugar than, say, last year. But I think in general, growing organically, there's more balance in the soil.
Okay.
And then that leads to the balance of the plant or the tree. And some of these organic apples, they tend to store better. They're just a little better balanced because of the balance with the soil. And that may be more on the fresh side of things, but it's not so much necessarily always high sugar, but they store better on the fresh side of things, I think.
Okay. And then before I hit record today, you and I were talking about, you have approximately 40 acres of cider apples?
Yes.
One of the things that I've struggled to wrap my brain around is that doesn't seem like a lot of acreage for the volume. So I have this disconnect between what a cidery is doing versus how much acres of fruit they have dedicated to it.
Well, I think the answer, and that's a good point. You say 40 acres and you're making all this cider. That doesn't add up. So we call the cider apples they're not more expensive to grow per acre than any other apple, but the yields are much lower per acre because of the size of the apples. They're very small. Mm-hmm. So the art of making cider is blending apples. So we have a certain percentage of these that we blend with dessert apples that are bought. We buy processed apples to blend with them, as everyone else does. So that makes and those apples are much cheaper. So then we're able to be competitive in the marketplace with with the rest of the competitors.
Okay, that's her opinion.
Yes.
She's sharing her opinion. That's good.
And then Craig is also just about, they're going to harvest next week the Russian red apples.
Well, we're growing a red flesh apple, and we named it Russian red during the whole Russia thing with Trump, kind of a political statement, and it's quite popular in Seattle right now. We're putting it in kegs, but we have quite a few more of those planted. It's an odd, obscure variety, very very sort of. It's a big, round, red, ugly apple, but it's all red inside when you pick it.
So then the juice comes out red.
The juice comes out, and it's as dark as beet juice, believe it or not. And many of these red flesh apples, when you go through fermentation, they wash out. I mean, it goes from dark red to, kind of this, liver color almost. This apple, it just stays really beautiful colored red after fermentation. So it's a beautiful, it's a beautiful liquid. And so we're planting more of those, and we're going to have more of this in the future as a, be it a rosé or a red cider. I think we'll stick with the name Russian Red. It's kind of interesting. And at some point we're going to put it in cans, which might even be in 22. Well, we're talking about that now.
Okay.
So that's a growth area that, Angry Orchards has, they have their rosé cider that they make, and that's been quite popular, but, they're using, I don't want to say they're not using apples to make it red. We'll leave it at that.
We're going to have red apples to make it red.
We're going to have red apples
yeah.
to make red cider. That's,
okay.
That's what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Are you experimenting? So, are you experimenting with other cider varieties to see how they grow in this area, or how they work maybe with
No, we've done that. We had a fellow named Peter Mitchell come over 14 years ago now. He also taught cider making classes. He's educated most all the cider makers in this part of the country.
Mm-hmm.
How to make cider. Sharon took the class.
Is that at WSU?
Yes, it is at the extension in Mount Vernon.
Correct.
Correct.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
So Peter and then we hired Peter Peter, what do we plant? That was my question to him. And they were all these obscure, to me, weird names, like what are we doing here? There's so many, what do you do? What do you plant? So initially we planted them alphabetically because I couldn't get my head around all these varieties. But there's 4 distinct types of cider apples: bitter sweet, bitter sharp, sharp, and sweet. And we had I think at one point almost 40 different varieties. Now we're down to about 5 varieties we're growing that we found that we can grow well here, that are commercially viable. Certainly a lot of the other varieties that make good cider, but for one reason or another, we just weren't successful with them.
Okay.
On the growing side. So
I'm going to ask you a question that I think people from the west side might have. So when I grew up as a kid, apple trees looked a certain way. They look like trees.
Mm-hmm.
You move over here to Central Washington, you pay attention to what's around us. Apple trees don't look like apple trees anymore.
Mm-mm.
I'm going to guess that that's because it's more efficient and more economically viable.
That's correct.
How long does it take to go from planting to production on an old-fashioned tree versus a newfangled wall?
Well, the old-fashioned trees we haven't grown those in a long time. But
in the history,
I would say it's 6 to 8 years to really get good production.
And how long would an old-fashioned tree be viable? In round numbers.
As far as producing good apples, it could easily be as much as 50 years. But
okay.
Typically, the variety got a flavor.
The market tells you it's not.
The marketplace was going to force you to do something long before that, probably.
Okay.
And now with these new high density, and the biggest thing that we're able to put so many more trees in what we call fruiting walls is the advent of all these different dwarfing rootstocks that control the size of the tree. So we can, instead of planting a tree 25 feet apart, we can plant a tree 3 feet apart and control the size, and we've been able to almost double our production per acre.
Okay, so a tree wall, if you were to plant one in 2021, when might it be at production?
Well, you'd have some production on the 3rd leaf, and by the 5th leaf, you're close to full production.
And how long are these good?
Well, there again, these trees will probably be good for 25, 30 years. But they may go out of favor in terms of varieties, but they'll probably actually last longer than that. They probably last for 40 or 50 years. But apple tree is a long growing tree, but the marketplace is it dictates how long it's going to be at a given variety. So
I drive up and down the Columbia from Wenatchee up to Pateros,
mm-hmm.
and along the Columbia there you see orchards. So I'm going to ask you what those guys are doing. Some of them have big shade cloths over them.
Yes, we have our farm in Yakima, which is down by the airport. It's all covered in shade cloth, and for us, we have well water there, and there's a lot of minerals in it. So when you're cooling these apples, which running the water intermittently, when it's above 85 degrees, gets residue on them over time. So we've gone to a shade cloth, and that's
to keep them cool.
Keep them cooler. The shade cloth, blocks some of the sun. And so, we had the hottest summer on record here, and we really have no sunburn under our situation this year. So that's been quite helpful to us. It changes the color slightly. The red is not quite as dark red. It's more of a pinkish. But I think you'll see more of that in certain instances with certain varieties is the shade cloth.
All right. So then when I was driving up here on some of the rows, I don't know that they were your rows, but looked like they had a reflective, like a aluminum foil.
Yeah, that's that's called color up, and that just bounces. So the trees are so close together, to get them to turn red in the lower portion of the tree, so it bounces a lot of light up. So on a day like this, it's bright out. You have to have your sunglasses on. You get blinded if you're walking down a tree row, and it really helps in coloring, especially on apples that have red, or what we call bicolored apples, which most of them are now, except a Red Delicious. It really helps getting more intense red color. And we at the Fresh Market, we get paid on color.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Because I've observed these things, right? It's kind of a recent transplant over here and not a farmer.
Mm-hmm.
And the other is called, you'll see some white cloth down. We call that extende. There again, that actually came from Australia and New Zealand. It's a woven factory. You can drive on it. It's good for a number of years. And that's the same thing. You can put that down. That bounces light back up into the tree. And so that's another, it's more expensive, but it's more of a long-term material you can use year after year.
Okay.
You'll see both.
Thank you. So I have all these questions bounce in my head, and this is part of the reason I do this is so I can go ask my questions to people. It's kind of fun.
You'll see as you drove down here through Ellensburg, as you go up the grade on the ridge there, you'll see all those orchards on the north side of the road there. That they've got all those long rows of white material down. That's extende, and those are all mostly Honeycrisp there, but that's what it's for, to bounce that light up in the trees.
Okay. So as we wrap this up, what I always like to ask my guests, when you're not doing what you're doing, what do you guys do for fun and excitement in Washington State?
Well, for me, I'm a skier. So whether it's skiing here or now we're going to be able to go back to British Columbia, I'm ready for ski season. I do a lot of mountain biking from here. I can just ride from here. So, so I do a lot of yoga. I like to exercise 6 days a week. So those are some fun things I like to travel. So
how about you, Sharon?
Well, I'm very interested in culture. So, and that is why we divide our time between Seattle and this farm. So I love all of the museums in Washington State. I just think some of the exhibitions that are mounted are just fantastic. I love the art community that's in. I love going to Meany Hall for the cultural calendar that they have in the fall and winter. Like I said, I'm a cook, so I love going to all the distinctive food outlets like Big John's and De Laurentiis, and I think that's one of the greatest things about Seattle and Washington State. And then I'm a huge reader.
Okay.
And that just fits right in. I mean, I did not know that Seattle was the most well-read city in America till I moved there, but I've always been a reader, but I'm more of a reader now.
Okay.
That's for sure. Yeah.
All right.
And I'm also, I swim, and I have I have a walking practice. We have a dog, and so I'm out.
Right.
And I never anticipated this, but I love the rain.
Huh.
I love the weather in Seattle. I know I'm the oddity out, but I don't think that's true. I mean, I think you cannot live in Seattle and complain about the rain. You just should move. My opinion.
I did.
Yes, exactly. If it didn't work for you, you move. I mean, you don't just hang around and moan about it. Oh my God.
Are either of you coffee drinkers?
We're tea
drinkers.
Okay, so I'm not a tea fan. Let me rephrase that. I do not have knowledge of tea. So, any great tea shops that you could share with people? Because I would ask that if it was a coffee shop. So tea. Yeah. Places for tea.
Well, actually, they don't make it in Seattle. There's been a couple. Tivana had a couple of locations, and they didn't stay. There was one in U Village, one downtown. I saw a small a tea place at the corner of John and Broadway the other day, which I have not gone in, but I did see it. There's also another one on 2nd, but the best one used to be on 19th, and it closed.
Okay.
So unfortunately, I can't give you a big
Seattle's
tea.
So coffee
centric.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
As we all know.
How about food in Yakima?
Oh, food in Yakima. Well, we're so lucky now because what's happened in our little town of Tieton. You know, the mighty Tieton people, and they've, do you know about this?
I don't.
Oh my God. You should go interview the mighty Tieton people.
Okay.
Yes, that's your next stop for sure. But there is now a man who has quite a culinary background, and it's called 617, and it's on the square in Tieton.
Okay.
And his Craig Singer, and he has a fantastic palette and menu and seasonal, and he does I think it's just Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
Okay.
But then he also has a small store on the square, and he has provisions in there, so you know you can buy. And there's also Tieton Farm and Creamery.
Okay.
2 people who are transplants from the West Side who make lovely cheese, and he carries all of their cheeses. Yes. So food in Yakima. So when I came here, there was one place that you could go for dinner, and that was pretty much it. And now that has completely changed. And there's several really good restaurants now.
Can I get you to name drop?
Yeah. There's Crafted. There's Cowiche Canyon. I'm sorry. I want to say Picnic, but that's not it. The one that's out by Provisions? Provisions.
Okay.
So those 3 are all excellent. And then Craig, you told me about the other day about this great pizza place that's here now.
Yeah, it's called the Kiln.
The Kiln?
Kiln.
So why do you say it's a great pizza place?
It's just good pizza. I mean, I go by there from time to time from one farm to the next. It's good.
Yeah.
I know it for a fact.
And they're also good customers of Tieton Cider Works.
Most of these restaurants buy some cider from us. But,
sure.
All right. But food is much improved in Yakima.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I went to college in Ellensburg, and we'd come to Yakima, and it wasn't.
It was a desert. No.
In the early 80s, it was not a particularly inspiring place, in my opinion.
But Wellensburg had it in that old kind of downtown. Yeah. What was that restaurant? We used to go there.
Oh,
Sharon. I know you know what I'm talking about.
I do too, and I can't think of them. I think there's one of 2, and I'm drawing a blank on both of them.
See, we'll have to have a footnote at the end of the podcast here.
But there was one kind of more of an upscale place that was in the downtown core.
Right.
And I cannot think of the name of that.
But he was great. He was innovative, and he was great.
But there was also...
Then there's a yellow house.
A little yellow schoolhouse that was more of a lunch place. But...
this doesn't work on a podcast, so don't keep trying to do it.
Yeah, it's not going to work. Yeah. We'll skip this, folks. Just kidding. So let me ask you this last question. So I received an email from you guys from Tieton inviting me up somewhere in late October for what my tongue is planted firmly in cheek when I say this, looking for free labor to harvest apples.
Oh,
that was more tongue in cheek. I think it's the Cider Club we're offering we still have a few apples left, so you can come up and pick a few apples if you're interested, and have lunch.
There's a harvest dinner, right?
Right, a harvest dinner at Mighty Tieton.
Yeah, at Mighty Tieton.
Okay,
that's kind of what it's about.
Mm-hmm. I got this, and I was chuckling. Oh, the labor they need me to provide labor. That was a joke on that part of it. No, but it was actually it worked. The joke worked well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think so. In years past, you've had Cider Club members come up and take a look, and I think it's fascinating to see where the product comes from.
Well, that's always the draw for people. And we do another separate from the Cider Club, but Craig and I started probably 10 or 11 years ago, one weekend, and we've invited our friends, and we have our friends from California come.
Oh, wow.
I mean, from Portland. I mean, they come and they just love this weekend. This year, one of the first people who ever came, she lives in Mexico now, and she scheduled her trip so she could be here for our apple picking weekend. But Craig we take everybody, we load flatbed trailers behind a tractor, and we take people through, and Craig gets out and he tastes, he provides a little slice of each variety so people can decide if they like it.
Oh.
And then people pick, and in the past we had charged them. And then this year when we do our apple picking, we've decided that we'll make a donation to the Tieton Arts and Humanities.
Okay.
Yeah, this year. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's really wonderful.
And people they bring their kids, and we show them how to pick an apple. You don't just yank it off the tree. You got to kind of roll it off.
That's what I was going to say. Because
so we
the
teach them
children,
how to
it's been
actually
so
pick,
great,
and they're into picking an apple.
Right. They don't get to if they're living in Seattle or Portland or Los Angeles.
Anywhere. I mean, even probably little kids in Yakima may not know how to go pick an apple,
Well, then that's certainly, when I was a kid growing up in the Tacoma Puyallup area, a lot of, summers we would make money by picking berries or beans and that, and, just don't have that anymore.
Right.
So.
But it's just good to get out on a farm, be it beans or berries or apples, just to kind of get a feel for
where does your food come from?
Where does it come from? I mean, in for most everybody, where's the food? It's at the store. It always has been, but it has to come from someplace to get to the store. And that every commodity has a story, and they're all pretty interesting.
Right. No. Well, I think we'll wrap it up with that. I could go down another rabbit hole, but I think I'll spare you both.
Okay.
Thank you. Do you have any last words? Where can people find out more about whatever and all of that?
Well, I think of our Tieton Cider Works, just keep checking in with our website. We keep adding things about the new ideas, new things. We've got new creations coming.
Yeah,
okay.
And you can join our Cider Club, of course. And then our farm also has a website.
Okay.
harmonyorchards.com. And there's a apple page on there. There's actually a page for everything that we grow in different varieties and explains, the parentage.
Okay.
So, yeah, those are the two ways.
More informational than anything. Yeah. But
so are the products from Harmony, are they available locally? Are they? Do you have like a farm stand or anything like that? Or
we don't. We pack our own apricots and some specialty apples, and they're shipped all over the country.
Okay.
And then the rest of it go to warehouses, be it Yakima or Wenatchee.
Okay.
And the variety.
Great. Well, thank you both very much. I appreciate your kindness and letting me be here.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Enjoyed this.
Join us next time for another episode of the Exploring Washington State podcast.